X-Men Apocalypse is out in cinemas, and believe it or not, it's the 9th film in the X-Men franchise. That's right, this movie is aimed at people who weren't even born when the first X-Men movie came out. God, I feel as old as Patrick Stewart. So it's got a lot of history to draw from the other films and the comics. And it hides lots of little references and Easter eggs in there for fans. Let's have a look at them all, at least the ones that I could find. Spoilers for X-Men Apocalypse lie ahead, obviously. First off, one of the Easter eggs a lot of people might be expecting to see is the album cover in this photo tweeted by Sophie Turner. It's lifted straight from Dazzler issue 29. Dazzler is a disco mutant. Literally, she's a pop star who makes light and sound with her superpowers. She's perfect for the 80s, which is when the film is set, but sadly this scene isn't actually in the film, so this is kind of a bonus Easter egg for you, I guess. On to who's actually in the film, and we've got a bunch of cameos. Stan Lee makes his now mandatory Marvel movie appearance as a terrified bystander when Apocalypse sets off all the nukes. The film's editor and composer John Ottman also appears briefly as a technician. The mutant Caliban has a small role as some kind of people smuggler. In the comics, he becomes one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, his uber-powerful bodyguards, but in the film he just kind of helps Apocalypse a bit. And of course there's that cameo by Wolverine. We see his escape from the Alkali Lake facility, which was in X-Men 2 as well. His hair is all wild and he's wearing this weird contraption on his head which is lifted straight from the Weapon X comic arc, which gives us Wolverine's origin story. Speaking of origin stories, the first scene in the film introduces us to Apocalypse in ancient Egypt with loads of worshippers calling him En Sabanur, the first one, which chimes with his origin in the comics. It also shows us a great pyramid roughly 1,000 years before the real ones were built, but that's fine because it gets destroyed before the title sequence begins. So don't worry, archaeology fans, the film doesn't break history, at least until it fast forwards to 1983. Other mutant cameos include Blob, who we see pretty bloody and beat up in the cage fight scene, which itself is a reference to the first X-Men movie. And Jubilee finally gets some decent close-ups after kind of but not really appearing in the earlier films, and she's dressed in her classic costume from the 80s. It's an exact match. It's awesome. Apocalypse's costume is also very similar to the way it's drawn, and Psylocke's costume is exactly like it is in the comics. Totally necessary. And at the end of the film, we see all the new X-Men in uniforms lifted straight from the 90s, which is when the next film will be set. No more plain black leather. In fact, when we see them, they're in the Danger Room, which has only appeared in The Last Stand before. And in the reference to that movie, they face off against Sentinels again at the end of X-Men Apocalypse 2, except instead of being a giant hologram, these are actually the same Sentinels we saw in Days of Future Past. I guess Professor X must have got them from the government after they tore up the White House. Lord knows how he swindled that one. By the end of the film as well, James McAvoy's Professor X is also looking just like Patrick Stewart did in the original films. He's got exactly the same wheelchair, although that does mean he's been riding the same chair for 25 years by the time he dies. Cheapskate. He loses his luscious locks when Apocalypse tries to transfer his consciousness into him so he can have all of the Professor's powers in addition to his own. I don't know why his hair falls out, it just does. In fact, Apocalypse likes giving makeovers to people in this movie. When we meet Storm, she has dark hair which turns white when Apocalypse enhances her powers. He makes Magneto a nice purple outfit with a helmet just like his old one, handy that, and gives Angel his metal wings, which actually does happen in the comics when Angel becomes one of the 4 Horsemen. Also, when Apocalypse first meets Angel, he's listening to Metallica's song 4 Horsemen on the stereo. That's from Metallica's first album, Kill 'Em All, which came out on July the 25th, 1983. Ha, I see what you're doing there, movie. And last but not least, the post-credit scene shows some business suit guy collecting Wolverine's blood from Alkali Lake and putting it in a suitcase with the name Essex Corp stamped on it. This is probably a reference to Nathaniel Essex, aka Mr. Sinister. In the comics, he's created by Apocalypse and becomes one of the 4 Horsemen. He eventually turns against Apocalypse, but more importantly, he creates the mutant Cable, who's rumoured to be the villain in Deadpool 2. Well, it's not really a rumour, because Ryan Reynolds said it to the camera while dressed as Deadpool, but you know what I mean. Anyway, does this mean that Deadpool 2 will tie directly into the next X-Men film? Who knows? So those are all the Easter eggs that I could find. I've only seen it once, so I probably missed something. If I did, please tell me in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you next time. If you like this video and are interested in hearing more of my ramblings about X-Men Apocalypse, you can click here to watch Sam and mine's review, full of spoilers. Bye!
Best scene in the whole film is the Quicksilver sequence again.
He aced it.
This
again.
one is absolutely, it's just joyful. It's
so good. So good.
It's so clever. So
it's
so
played
well
more
done.
for laughs, I think, than the one in Days of Future Past.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which, I mean, Days of Future Past one is funny, but this one is much more funny.
Absolutely, yeah.
Deliberately so.
And it plays, again, plays a pivotal role in the plot.
It does.